My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So, I'm Cloud Hired, guys!
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Michael Gibbs, and I am here to help you build your technology career and answer any questions you may have along the way. I've been an IT architect, like a network architect, an enterprise architect, a solutions architect, a business architect for over 25 years. And for the last 2+ decades, I've helped people just like you get your first tech job at Apple, at Amazon, and Cisco, and Google, and IBM, and Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I've almost never had anyone that started with a salary of less than $100,000 inside of the U.S. over these years. So I've been advising people on their tech careers, and I want you to have a great tech career. So please bring your questions so we can answer your questions about how you can get ahead in your career. Before we do, I've got a couple of free things that we're doing for the community here at Go Cloud Careers. And one of them is we are going to run a completely free, great cybersecurity boot camp. And it's going to prepare you for the Certified Cloud Security Professional exam from the ISC Squared. And that is a real professional certification. It is the kind of certification that people will see. It's the kind of certification that you'll actually learn something that can benefit you, say, in your cloud architect or cloud security architect career, as opposed to many of them, which are more systems administration, non-architect based. It's great for your brand. And we're going to run it completely free. It's one of these things where a CCSP and CISSP boot camps tend to be $5,000 to $10,000 if you want to learn from someone that knows security, and most people don't have that. So that's why we're going to do it free and live. Come sign up now, and we'll do teaching, and then afterwards we'll do teaching. We'll do questions to make sure you all understand the content, because this is very important content. So that's all free. Let me also tell you that on this Thursday, we're going to have another one of our Zoom webinars where we will tell you how to become a cloud architect. We will go over all the cloud architect roles, all the cloud architect responsibilities, every skill you need. We'll tell you how we train people. And then after that, you can ask us any questions you want about you and your career, guidance, go through your resume, your LinkedIn thing, whatever we can do on that one of those free webinars to help you in your career. And we're happy to do so. So sign up, it's free. And also, the next thing that I was going to say is that we've got a guide on how to become a cloud architect, or how to become an AI architect, or how to win the interview. They're all in the description of this video, especially this cloud architect career guide. So go get it. It's free. Sign up and enjoy the ebooks that our team has written for you. So at this point, there's probably some questions from the audience about your career. So bring them, Tyrone or Chris, or who's up in the background right now, because I know you both were earlier. Mike, how do you suggest that you take control of an interview? Great question. Where the hiring managers are biased to a cloud provider and services. So the first thing is, how do you take control of the interview? It starts before you got there. So what do I mean by that? What's on your resume are going to be the things that the hiring manager is going to interview you on. So please understand that. If it's not on your resume, it won't go there. For example, I see a lot of times where architects actually go on architect interviews, and then what happens is somebody asks them an engineering question and they don't know why, and then they show me the resume and I'm like, okay, you're an engineer. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, your resume shows me you're an engineer, so I'm going to interview you on engineering questions, for example. But so all of that, your resume has to be right. Now, if the hiring manager is biased against the cloud provider, that's okay. I mean, your bias and all what you need to show is my bias is to making you successful. And what I will do is use any tools, technology, or anything I can do to help you be more successful. Because that's your bias as an architect. And nobody can fault you for your bias because if they're biased towards a cloud provider. Now, you might want to know why they're biased towards that cloud provider if you want to work there. Do they have a brother or sister that works for that cloud provider? Did they used to work for that cloud provider? Because bias is one of the most dangerous things we have in architecture. Imagine if you walk into a doctor's office, here's bias. And everybody at the doctor's office got this little yellow pill. Everybody got the yellow pill regardless of their condition. That's bias, and bias destroys architecture. So bias towards anything is always a problem. We have to look objectively at that customer's business needs. We have to look objectively at what their workflows are going to be. We have to look objectively at the sophistication of the people they have, the types of processes that need to occur, that entire value chain that they have and how it works, and the conglomerate of all the systems they have and the systems they need to figure out what's even best for them in the first place. So there is that. So do you want to work for someone who only wants to go towards one solution? That's a question for you. But Shifting Tangerine, here's the reality. I've worked for people that are biased towards a particular technology. They tend to last about 2 years in the role before they're fired and replaced by somebody that cares more about end-to-end success. So think about it that way. But the real key is, if they want to talk to you about a provider, talk to them about the provider. And if they ask you about something called S3, say, sure, S3, otherwise known as object storage, and talk about object storage in the context of object storage and show you know more. If they want to talk about an EC2 thing, talk about it as a virtual machine. Talk about how migrating a virtual machine from the data center or from Azure or from wherever into an AWS virtual machine called an EC2 instance is no big deal for you because you've got lots of knowledge and competency with virtual machine products. So you're really just showing them that you know what it is. But you're not going to be able to do too much about the person's bias. Now, what you can do ahead of time is you can research the person before you speak to them. You can know what they like, and you can know what they dislike. Pretty easy to do reconnaissance in today's world. They call it open source investigations. Look at somebody's social media profiles. Look at the papers that they've written. Look at their content. You'll figure out who they are. And you may use some of that information or intelligence to redirect your interview or show you how you answer your questions in a manner that that particular person would like you as well. But all of that starts before the interview. That's why we say reconnaissance before you do an interview and a preparation and research the company and what the company needs, what the manager's needs are, what the manager's goals are, because you need to be able to show that in your interview. So make the resume correct. Do your recon ahead of time. It will get you very, very, very far. And hope that answers your question, Shifting Tangerine. And please feel free to ask more. Hi, Mike and everyone. How to ensure that the cloud infrastructure you design can scale as the business grows while maintaining high performance? Great question there, Cloud Doctor. So the reason we can't have a pre-designed plan in our head before we actually understand our client's needs is we need to know where the business is going. So what do I mean by that? Some businesses are stable businesses. They're blue chip businesses. They've been around for 100 years or 200 years, and they're at a certain size, and they're going to stay happily humming along on that certain size for long periods of time. Maybe they buy a company, maybe they sell a company, but they stay at a similar size. Their plans are continue to dominate the market that they're in and just be a better provider and be the best of everything they do. Lots of companies exist like that. And guess what? For these people, they have stable business needs. Why am I saying this? Because you may have another organization that is extraordinarily well-funded. and maybe it's got billions of dollars to fund an expansion that is going on right now, and they have an actual real expansion plan. But now you're going to need something that's much more agile, and even though it's going to start small, is going to need a very big and properly set up foundation. So that's why you kind of need to know that. So the first thing you need to do with any architecture is ask the executives the vision of that business and really get it. And then you also need to understand the way the the way virtual machines. So where the business. So now you're gonna need to look at the business architecture. Well, meaning, what is it? Is it a labor-intensive business? Because that's going to mean different types of systems that you need. It's a business that can be kind of automated. How's the product going to be created? And what steps need to occur for that to happen? Can it be automated? Can it be simple? Do we need a lot of manual processes and steps along the way? How is a product created? How is a product serviced? We need to think all of that. And when we get that information, then we need to think about what we're going to do. So, for example, in that big blue chip company, they may need a pretty strong network. And that network may be they have a data center and 2 clouds, and a normal enterprise will. 98% of enterprises are more than 1 cloud. They need that availability. They need the ability to put the right workloads in the right places. And the foundation of that's going to be the network. And then after we get the networking in that core and access distribution type layer, which might be modified to spine and leaf for this type of environment, but we need to get that in. And when we know that the network's in, then we know the foundation and the platform that the systems are going to grow. And then after we think of the network, we need to think of what type of compute structure or infrastructure we need to have based upon where their goals and they're going. We need to understand how much control they need to have of the technology. For example, if they need a lot of control, we are not going to go manage service anything. If they need extraordinary performance, we're going to tend to use more virtual machine-based environments. If they have things that are very sporadic, then we might think about an event-driven way. But we need to know all of this. And then the other part of a cloud doctor is to realize that a normal enterprise has between 200 and 1,000 actual applications. So we need to think what's going to give us the flexibility and the scalability to deal with these applications. So things like proprietary stuff from a cloud provider, probably going to put you in a bad position. Things like an AWS Aurora or a DynamoDB. Why? They're great databases, but the problem is we're going to need something that's going to work in multiple clouds. So we've got to toss them out in most cases. So anything proprietary has to go. So now we need the flexibility in our systems and the openness in between our systems and the flexibility in our infrastructure. And that planning that we're talking about, that's going to take months to figure that one out. So I hope I tried to take a few months and summarize it into a few minutes. Please feel free to ask more, Cloud Doctor. Drifting Tangerine, what is more important in getting a cloud job? Is it tech skills or business skills? Drifting Tangerine, could you tell me which job you're actually looking for? Because each role are very different. If it's a cloud architect role, for example, it's 70 to 80% about your business skills and 20 to 30% about your tech in most cases. If you wanted to be a DevOps engineer, it's going to be 80% technical skills and 20% business and human skills. So I need to know the actual role. Now, I can tell you if we're dealing with an architect of any one kind, enterprise architect, cloud architect, AI architect, solutions architect, it's always going to be mostly about the business, because in these roles, we give presentations to clients every single day. We have to lead an architecture team. We have to drive a team to respond to an RFI, RFP, RFQ. We're going to be giving presentations every single day or almost every day, either presenting at executive briefings, presenting at conferences, presenting in front of an audience, presenting in terms of training of the people inside of our own companies. We're constantly doing it. We're going to be selling products. We're going to be facilitating meetings. For the most part, those are the documenting things, and that's going to be the majority of our work. And when it comes to things getting deeply technical, if I'm a cloud architect, I'm going to have an AI architect, I'm going to have a database architect, I'm going to have a big data architect, I'm going to have an application architect, I'm going to have a security architect, I'm going to have a network architect, and I'm going to have some engineers on my architecture team too, to make sure we get the planning right. So at the architect level, it's much more business. And that's one of the reasons I love Drifting Tangerine. The architect jobs we cannot be replaced by technology, because so much of this is human to human interaction. Now, if you're talking an engineering job, well, now that's more on the tech side. So that cloud architect, AWS solutions architect, Azure architect's never going to touch the technology. We're not allowed to on our roles. We don't code, we don't configure, we don't do DevOps. That's somebody else's job. We're designing systems. But by comparison, now we have a cloud engineer. And for that cloud engineer, now this person has to build stuff. And they have to be focused on the technical depth of what we need. And that cloud engineer is going to be working with systems in two clouds. They're going to be working with infrastructure as code every single day on Terraform, most likely, which again is going to be deeply technical. That cloud engineer is going to be writing Python scripts, again, deeply technical. That cloud engineer may make some some automation scripts and say Bash shell for Linux and Windows PowerShell. That cloud engineer may have to manage some Windows server along the way. That cloud engineer is going to be dealing with DevOps tools. You can see that job is probably 80% technical and about 20% business. So that's why I asked with job. If you want to let me know, great. Otherwise, maybe I covered one of your two jobs along the way. Hey, everyone. Suggestions on how to face questions in an interview for cloud architect where they start talking about cloud engineers questions. Okay, that's going to happen for one of two reasons. So Diego, if you have the right resume, it's not going to go there unless you answer the question. So, it's funny. I had a student, his name was Arun. And Arun went on, I think, 25 architect interviews that had nothing to do with architecture until we made these things. So Arun kept saying, Mike, I don't know why they keep talking to me about engineering and sysops and DevOps and coding. So I said, Arun, it's Tuesday. Can we dedicate this class to your resume? And he's like, oh, really, Mike? Thanks. So I changed the class we were going to do because I wanted every student I had to see it. We went through Arun's resume. We got rid of DevOps certifications, SysOps certifications, developer certifications. We got rid of every mention to DevOps, Python code, and we replaced it with all business things. And poof, Arun went on 3 interviews, had offers from 3 different companies. And the key was they were asking him about business things. So the first thing is basically in what you pre-warm them with what's going to be in your resume. The next way is going to be the way you answer a question. If you answer a question in a very succinct, easy to understand manner, when I ask you an interview question, when that question's over, I typically move on to easier things. Now, if that question is not answered properly, now we're going to dive deep to see your gaps and your limitations. So here's an answer. Here's a question, and here's the way it should be answered. I'll tell you the way it's normally answered, and then what we hiring managers normally do on the interview. Mike, could you compare and contrast block storage and object storage and when you would use each and how they work? So the first thing I would do, Diego, is say, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Are you asking me to compare and contrast block storage, object storage, how they work and how they might be used? And the person says yes. First, I showed them my communication skills, and you definitely want to do that. Now, if I then say, well, let's be fair, both block storage and object storage are types of storage area network, which means they're accessed over the network, and ultimately the network will be the limitations of their performance. Let's start with block storage. Block storage is the type of storage area network where the data when it's broken down, is placed in blocks anywhere on the storage area network. And because it's placed anywhere on the storage area network, it's effectively decoupling my storage architecture from my server architecture, which allows for scalability. Because the data is stored in blocks, much like the way a traditional hard drive stores its data in blocks, block storage can be accessed over a network as a virtual hard drive. And that's why we use block storage, typically speaking, as a virtual hard drive in the data center and the cloud. If I then said, let's say object storage, by example, is another type of storage area network. But what we have here is when data is stored in object storage, the data becomes an object. Now, when that object's stored, there's a couple of interesting things that happen. First, we get metadata, which is data about this thing that we're actually storing, which makes it much easier to find. But it's not normal storage. Object storage, typically speaking, can't be mounted by a virtual machine, and therefore it's used for backup and archival purposes, software distribution, distribution of photos and videos. At that point, the person's going to be satisfied. And Diego, they're not going to go down deep. Now, if I asked the question and said, could you compare and contrast block storage and object storage and when you would use them and how they work? And this is what I normally would get. The person will say, oh, yes, object storage is S3. You configure a bucket and you put your stuff in there. Block storage, yeah, EBS, that's the stuff you might use with your EC2 instance. Now, if I get an answer like that, where they didn't know, the next thing that's going to happen is, could you talk to me about the metadata in object storage? Could you tell me why I can't use object storage as a virtual hard drive and why it's a write once, read many times storage? And that's where it's going to go there. So there's that. So how you answer these questions is going to be the thing that's going to make the difference. I'd like to make this suggestion: frame your answers. So for example, I like to frame my answers into, what is this technology? For the most part, how does the technology work and what are the business benefits? I think if you try that and you practice explaining it that way, it'll be so much easier for people to understand. And when they understand it easily, they feel you know it, and then they don't have to probe and feel deep. Hope that answers that question for you. But they're typically the two reasons these things happen. Tony, hi, Mike. Thanks for all you guys do. You're currently enrolled in the AI Architect program. Wonderful. Do I have any plans for a CCNP boot camp soon? You took our CCNA boot camp and it's a gem. So, Tony, I am not sure. I can tell you that we're doing the CCSP, that Certified Cloud Security Professional exam, and that's a pretty big one. I'm probably going to do another certification of some kind before the year's over if we can schedule it. But it's not in the plans right now, but it could be in the plans in the future. But if your goal is AI architecture, I would probably focus my efforts on either AI, or I would focus them on learning business skills, learning more leadership skills, learning more executive skills in addition to what we teach you, improving your business acumen. Because when you start looking at architect and architect pay over time, you know, the architects that are earning between $500,000 and $800,000 a year have the most business acumen and the biggest impact in the business of that chief architect sort of role. So I would say more and more and more and more, towards the business side. So I kind of hope that actually helps make sense. But if you love networking, I can still say the CCNP is good, but it's not necessarily going in the exact direction as your AI architect program. Anyway, don't be shy. If you have questions, bring them in. We love answering questions around here. Hi. Can answer that question about business versus technical. So rough recension for a cloud security architect, please. Okay, so a security architect's a specialty architect. So let's say in this role, it's 35% tech and it is 75% business. So let's talk about what you really need to do in this role, Steve, and what good architects do. Now, there are architects that don't do this, but when architects tend to not do this, they have architecture failures. And how often do architectures actually fail? Well, 70 to 80% of the time. So let's talk about what you should be doing as in any architect role. And after that, what we'll talk about is, the balance of these skills and where you're going to want these skills. So if we're doing real architecture and not design engineering, the first thing we really need to do is understand the needs and the vision for the business. And that's for any architect in general, because everything we're going to do is either going to impact the business. It's going to change the workflow. We add too much security, we break the way they can do business. Don't add enough security, they get hacked. Add in too much security, now the employees find workarounds. So we have to understand first the goals, vision for the business. Then the next thing we need to really do is learn how that organization operates, its business architecture, its business processes. And then we need to know, how do those business processes want to work? What did those enterprise architects and cloud architects do with their architectural design? So now we understand that. Now, the next thing we need to do as security architects is evaluate the organization's actual assets. What is it, for example, that they're actually trying to protect? Is it intellectual property, for example? Is that what they're trying to protect? Is it, do they have data? So what are they really trying to actually protect? So that's one of the first things that you need to understand, is one of their assets. And then after we get their assets, we need to quantify those aspects. So if you're familiar in an MBA program, the way you would create an expected value of an opportunity, well, in security, we have to do the same thing. We have to say, okay, we've got this intellectual property that's worth $2 billion. We feel there's a 5% chance of an annualized basis for that asset being compromised. So we need to figure the cost for that. So that's one of those kind of things that we need to think of. We need to value their costs. We need to evaluate their risks. And then that's kind of what we're coming from. So we need to quantify their opportunities. Then we need to quantify their risks. Now, after we do that, now we need to start evaluating their current technology. So in a security architecture world, what do their demilitarized zones look like? What's their SIEM systems look like? What does their data loss prevention strategy look like? What's their end-to-end security policy? What's their encryption policy? What's their application security policy? Like, what are they doing on the application side? What kind of governance structures happen? Who's the incident response team during an incident? This is all security architecture work. Who speaks to the press? Who deals with the legal regulators? Who does this, and all these other things? So that's kind of a lot of that stuff that's going to be part of our security architecture plan. Then what we're ultimately going to have to do after we get past that is we now need to create the design for the new architecture. Well, actually, right before that, we need to say, okay, we know the risks. We know what their tech needs to look like. Now we need to determine, what are we going to do? Do we mitigate the risks? In which case, that's a new security architecture, like new firewalls, IDS, IP systems, what have you, whatever it's going to take to get you there. Does the organization transfer the risk by buying insurance to someone? And in the security architecture world, you got to help them make those decisions. So assuming you've decided you're going to mitigate the risks, now how are you going to mitigate the risks? Now that means you are speaking with all the various stakeholders in the company you're going to be working for, people from different departments, for example. You're going to have to find out what their needs are and what their weaknesses are and what their challenges are, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of hope that kind of stuff. Then you're going to have to create your architecture team that's going to design the system for you. And if you're the security architect, you could be working with other security architects. You're probably going to work with an identity and access management architect. You're probably going to be working with some security engineers because they know the deep details. You're going to all be looking at the vulnerability scans that you actually had. You're going to be looking whatever penetration results, anything that you have for this. And all this stuff you're going to use as an input based upon the business goals, business processes to create your new business architecture. At some point, you're going to basically take this architecture that you've actually designed, present it back to the customer, present it back to the customer stakeholders, and work in the account team to go sell that architecture. So, Steve, as you can see, most of that stuff is business. And whether there's an RFI, RFP, RFQ, like a request for proposal that you'll be responding to, and you'll be doing it, whether you're giving a presentation in a conference, whether you're working across stakeholders to prepare a security policy, that is the job. So it's all that planning. And, as architects, we never touched the technology, which is why I never understood why architects started learning to code after they got hired in architecture or touching technology. We need to focus on how we can help our clients be more strategic and get the most out of what they can. So that's there. So do you still need to know about security? Sure. For example, you need to know about IDS, IPS systems and various next generation firewalls and how they fit in, and the various forms of encryption and the legal environment in the environment, and storage type encryption versus IPsec type encryption versus SSL based TLS. So you still have to understand a lot of the technology, but it's not how do I configure the firewall? It's what do I need to tie in end to end to create a cohesive security strategy. And it's also about evaluating, okay, we've got this option or this option. This option gives us all these great things, but it costs us this. This option gives us this thing and this thing, which is not as good, but it doesn't hurt here. And architecture is ultimately the evaluation of trade-offs to determine what is worth it given your use case. Hope that helps, Steve. Green fingers. Thanks for the information. You're currently in the cloud computing 6 course. Would adding data analytics or Python be beneficial to get you an entry-level job quickly? So green fingers, first, could you tell me what your goal is? The next thing that I want to tell you, and I'd love to tell you, is why you should not try to get an entry-level job and what you should do instead. And I'll tell you why. So if your goal is cloud computing, what do you want to be learning? So the first thing we need to define is what actual career you want. So do you want to be a cloud architect? That's one set of skills. Do you want to be a cloud engineer? That's a different set of skills. Do you want to be a DevOps engineer? Different set of skills. Do you want to be a software developer? Different set of skills. Do you want to be an AI engineer, which again is a job on the cloud? Different set of skills. An AI architect? Different set of skills. An IAM architect? Different set of skills than an IAM engineer. Do you want to be a data scientist, which is another job? Do you want to, I hope you get that. So most of the people that I work with that have taken cloud computing courses for 6 months get a little everything, but you ultimately will have to pick one job. So we have to pick one for you. And then if you have a job as being a big data analyst, yeah, this is a data analytics course would be hugely helpful. You want to be a data engineer, again, it might still be helpful for you, but we have to know what job you're doing. So that's what I would want you to do first. And which I think my team gave me some guidance. So the question, so we're ultimately going to have to know where you want to go, green fingers. Like, what do you want to do? What's your ultimate career goal? Oh, wait, I see it in the chat box. Your goal, ultimate goal, remote, medium, to high pay, minimal sales, face-to-face. So, okay, so let's talk about that, green fingers. High pay always means face-to-face. Always. There's no high pay for the most part without high face-to-face. Medium pay, we can get to there. So what do I mean? An architect earns, $150,000 to $800,000 a year, but they're all customer facing. An engineer, for the most part, we can go up to 150 based upon the career that we're trying to work with. So the next thing is, which career do you want to do? We have to pick a career for you. And that's ultimately the thing. So if you want to be a cloud engineer, for example, and a cloud engineer is generally not a face-to-face role, here's my suggestion. And this is going to be my minimum entry-level skill set and certification for a cloud engineer. Green fingers, there are no entry-level jobs, and here is the reason. Entry-level jobs are more technician jobs, and cloud computing kind of made most of those technician jobs go away. The people that racked and stacked the servers, for example, and the data center. Cloud computing made those go away for the most part, unless they work for the cloud provider. So those are the entry-level jobs that used to exist. The next set of entry-level jobs are the cloud admins, the people that would just click on a few boxes here and there and add like a virtual machine. Green fingers. One DevOps engineer can replace 50 of those people. So do I hire 50, $75,000 people? Or do I hire 110,000 person? So they're gone for that. Now, the next thing is that AI can do most of these basic things better than the average cloud admin. So those entry-level jobs are not there. Don't worry, green fingers, you can get a much better job that's going to pay you more. And when you compete at a higher level, you have less competition anyway, and it's easier to get a better job than it is for an entry-level job. That's why I never had an entry-level job in my life, and I can give you examples. Maybe I'll give you a few examples of people that didn't. For example, Noah Parker was a social worker before he became a solution architect after our training. Or Pierre Dassault was a sailboat operator, where his first tech job was at Lease Web. Or Ivan Tamba, whose first job after our training was a solutions architect at AWS. Or Daniel Bosu, who's 20 years old, whose first job was a solutions architect after our training at, at JP Morgan Chase. So the plan is, and I can give you example after example, anybody can do it as long as you get the right training. So if I wanted to be a cloud engineer, here's what I would do. I would do my minimum certification on a cloud provider, which is the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. That will give you 10 to 15% of that cloud engineering skill that you need. Because, well, they're not architecture exams, they're engineering exams. So that'll give you some. The next thing that I would do is I would learn Linux if I wanted to be a cloud engineer. How good would I be at Linux and what certification would I get? Well, I would get the Red Hat certified engineer if you're brand new. And why would I do that? Because at that level, for the most part, normally I don't care if you've got a certification. I care if you've got that level of skills. But if you're brand new, I want 2 to 3 professional certifications to make, which is bait for me to interview you. So learn Linux to get that good and then pass that exam. The next thing that I need to know is you're strong with infrastructure as code. So go out there and learn Terraform and get real good at Terraform. Now, you want to be a cloud engineer. You're not going to be a cloud engineer without learning Python. So you're going to have to learn Python too. You're also going to have to learn Bash shell scripting and Windows PowerShell scripting at bare minimum. And if you are good with that, and maybe you know a few DevOps tools, and you can learn some good DevOps tools, if you have those skills, which you can develop through hard work and maybe some training, poof, you're getting out there and your first cloud engineering job is going to pay you $100,000, $120,000 a year. Maybe 80 to 120, but somewhere in there, because you're not entering entry level. And you'll rise to the occasion. Now, I got to tell you, it'd probably be easier for me to train you to make you a cloud architect. It's still going to take the same 6 to 12 months for either set of skills that were here. And why as a cloud architect? I didn't recommend it because you said you didn't want to be face to face. It's because you'd have to learn how to give presentations. You'd have to learn how to sell. You'd have to learn how to be in front of a customer. You'll earn far more money there, and you won't have to learn half as much tech. But we got to do what we like, and you said you don't want to be customer facing. Now, what I talked about for a cloud engineer, you could do that same thing for a DevOps engineer and their set of skills. Green fingers, I am not sufficiently prepared to tell you how to become a DevOps engineer, but if that's a goal you have, Sandeep Das over in India has got a YouTube channel, is pretty good at that. That's kind of his world, DevOps, where my world is architecture, but I've trained lots of cloud engineers, and so I know what actually is needed in there as well. The alternative could be you could like software development, for example, and that could be, again, something that's completely different. So I really want to know what you want to do, what you're passionate about, what you're willing to learn about, because that's going to be the secret to success. You can't pick a job on pay. I did it once. I can tell you I did. And on the third day, I realized it was going to be my last day. And thankfully, I had another opportunity. But you got to be happy. Because if you're happy in your job and you like it, it's not going to feel like a job. And when it doesn't feel like a job, you'll volunteer to be on the bigger projects. And if you care enough to shine on the bigger projects, that's how your career goes up. So it's up to you. But that's what I would do to be a cloud engineer. And it sounds like if you're doing things in cloud computing, that'd probably be closer. But I wouldn't do the data analytics unless I wanted to be in the data profession, like data engineer, data architect, that kind of thing. And please don't be shy. Ask questions. Hi, Mike. You've got a background in account management. Okay, that's a great background. In different industries, basically hand-holding businesses and executives. That's not normal, the type of account management that I'm thinking of. So I don't know what you mean by that. Normal account management, Adam, and let me ask you if Adam 123, if this is what you mean. To me, account management is having a client, learning the client's business needs, selling the client the product. If there's a problem, making sure the customer service people or tech support people deliver the right solutions, presenting at industry conferences. And we're talking about a $200,000 to $300,000 tech sales professional job. That's what I'm thinking. And if you're doing that, Adam 123, a lot of this is going to transfer over. In fact, Adam 123, I always told people when they said, Mike, who's going to be the easiest person to train to be a cloud architect? And I usually say salespeople and medical people. And the people laugh at me. They're like, salespeople and medical people. And I'm like, yeah. Salespeople know how to build a team. They know how to lead a team. They know how to give a presentation. They know how to follow up, and they know how to sell. And an example is, what's his name? Al Legister was a student of ours. He came to us as a senior sales rep. He left our program with a senior solutions architect job at Deloitte. So there's that. So I didn't know what you meant by so if that's what you mean by hand-holding, the kind of things that I'm talking about, yeah, then these are highly, highly valuable skills. Yes. This is a great skill for anything. So let me tell you why. Sales translates into every major role. You're a cloud architect or a solutions architect, you got to sell your solution to your client. Have to. You're a senior solutions architect and you're leading an architecture team, and now you got to get all these people to want to work for you. Again, you got to sell. Your client wants to do something that's not in their best interest because somebody told them to. And it's your job to sell them into doing the right thing so they don't waste their money or they get the performance they need. So, yeah. So if you're doing all that kind of stuff, Adam, that is one of the best set of skills I've actually ever seen. And I honestly I trained with a couple of really good account executives when I was practicing internal medicine in my youth as a nurse practitioner. And the reason I did was this. I wanted to give a patient of mine that I had Coumadin, that needed Coumadin because she had a rhythm called AFib, which could cause a big stroke. When I tried to give that patient a prescription for Coumadin, she was like, but that's the same thing in rat plays. And I'm like, yes, but if I don't give you this, you're going to die. You're going to have that heart attack and die. And she wasn't there. So I actually went to sales training so I could learn how to convince my patients to exercise when I told them to, eat the way they needed to, and take the medications that they needed to. And all those account management skills are great in advisory roles, whether it be medicine, law, architecture, because that's really what we're doing. Great set of skills on them. Mike, what does AI ML architecture need on its own compute resources? Whereas adding AI to an existing production environment create additional overhead? So Wes Cooper, what a good question. So the first thing we need to actually think on in any AI architecture is actually the data. So what do I mean by this? A couple things. First thing we need to think is the goals. But when we look at the technology, the first thing we need to think about is the data. If we don't have good data, we cannot do AI. So behind the scenes in any one of these data and any AI system is data. Data serves as the source of truth for your models. And if the data is bad. So let's talk about that. So the first thing, we've got a new client that wants AI. We have to find out what do they want to do. And we need to find out how they want that business to operate. And then we need to understand, what do they actually have? And the reason I say this is, if we understand all of that, first, the use case. The use case is going to be the most critical. And then we understand what their technology is. Then we can start thinking into what's needed to them. Do they need a large language model? Do they need a small language model? Could the model that they're going to be running for their needs run on a CPU, or does it need a discrete GPU? If it can run on a CPU, how much CPU capacity is already available that could be run somehow on that? Or does it need to be on a GPU? Now, what kind of GPU? Now, if we need GPUs, what do we need to train these models? Assuming we want our own customized models. And what do we need to run these models? For example, it's much cheaper to run these models long-term in your data center than the cloud. But in most cases, it's cheaper to train them in the cloud than it actually is in the data center. So maybe you train your model in the cloud and bring it back to its data center. Now, when we're dealing with this with AI, it's the data and then the compute. So maybe we need servers that have GPU, or maybe we can even use what we have. Because Wes, most businesses I've been working with have had some form of AI for the last 2 decades. So then when we figure out what we need, and then it's a matter of figuring out what kind of compute capacity we need and where we should put it. So it depends on the actual use case. A lot of the data centers that I worked on actually still have a lot of capacity left, and they could do certain things in there. But I haven't been on anything that didn't, any data center that didn't have any kind of data and or GPU work for at least 10 years. So, and it depends on what the data center actually has. But it's a great question. But generally speaking, the processing has to be done on something. And where is that processing typically done? It can be done on some models can be done on the central processing unit. And the CPU is great because it's cheaper than most GPUs as a rule. These new AMD EPYC CPUs are incredible workhorses. We have a lot of DRAM that we can work with in these particular environments if we need them, and we may actually have extra capacity. Next comes the GPU. GPUs start to get pretty pricey, and but we may need a lot of GPUs. We may need 1,000 GPUs. You may need 100,000 GPUs. Elon Musk's new startup has about 200,000 GPUs that he just bought this year. I mean, it's incredible the amount that's there. Amazon probably bought hundreds of thousands of GPUs. Microsoft, I'm sure, bought hundreds of thousands of GPUs. In fact, both Microsoft and Google right now both bought nuclear power plants to power their AI because that's how much GPU computing they're thinking. Now, what's also interesting, Wes, is in some cases, we can use something called like a fully programmable ASIC or an ASIC that can do certain things in hardware. And when they're in hardware, ultimately, they work very fast. Google also invented their own hardware called Tensor. I think they're Tensor processors. But so it all depends on the data center. But typically speaking, it's going to take more compute in some format, but is it going to be done on the GPU, the CPU, the GPU, or other forms? And will it create overhead? Well, it depends on the data centers. Do they have sufficient power and cooling? If not, how big do they have to be? Are they going to be Microsoft size where they need their own nuclear power plants? Because that's what it's coming to. Great questions there, Wes. Does GoCloud Careers offer resume reviewing and interview coaching? Absolutely. You want to leave the government work and work commercially, but your resume is not getting the responses. Yes, we absolutely have that. So there's a couple ways we could do that. The cheapest way is basically to, if you've already got all the perfect set of skills, is to take our tech interview mastery program. And in that, we do some interview work. And there's also a lot of resume training that's there. And then if you needed, you could schedule a one-on-one with a discount. And that wouldn't be that much compared to what we could do. And why do I say this? If you have the right set of skills. Because if you don't have the right set of skills, it's going to need more than this. But why am I particularly big on, maximizing the value of your interview and making sure you do it right? So, and maximizing business acumen. And I'll show you it's for this reason. And I've seen miracles with interview coaching. I'm not saying that we need to coach you. I'm just saying that it makes sense. So here's like a principal solutions architect role. Chris, can you share this for me? And this is why anyone, this principal solutions architect role at Google. Here's what I want to call your attention to. That wacky pay range of $394 to $677. Now, some of this is going to be based upon your bonus, which is typically sales. But there's going to be about an $80,000 to $100,000 difference on the job that you take based upon your interview. So keep that in the back of your mind. It makes sense to do your reconnaissance ahead of time. And even if you just want the free interview guide that's in the description of this video, Wes, I'd be happy to give it to you because my goal is just to elevate you and everyone here in their lives. So I'm not saying you have to buy our course. We've even got a free ebook you can do. But yes, we do it. Yes, we have training for it. And anybody that trains with GoCloud Careers is taught how to build their resume, taught how to build their LinkedIn profile, taught how to create the right content, taught how to interview, and even taught how to negotiate a higher salary. Because you can't get people hired in big jobs by just training them in tech. You need to train the presentation skills, the leadership skills, the sales skills, the executive presence, the emotional intelligence. And then you're going to be here. Plus, Wes, you said you're coming from the government. Are you coming from the military? Perchance? Because if you're coming from the military, now you can talk more about your mental toughness, your willingness to stay in the fight no matter how hard it gets. The knowledge on how to adapt and improvise and overcome and take direction. So if you are coming from the military, I would talk to you about that. Please feel free to come to more questions. Please feel free to come to our webinar on Thursday on how to become a cloud architect. And even if it's not about a cloud architect and you want to ask me a question live on Zoom, it's free and I'd love to do anything I can to help you. You want to transition into cloud architecture with no IT background. Should you start with the CompTIA fundamentals before moving into cloud-specific courses? Okay, Dastro, here's my recommendation. Never waste your time on any CompTIA certification. And here's why I say this. First, I like CompTIA. I think they're great. They made some very good certifications that covered fundamentals. They were vendor neutral and they have a lot of good about them. Here's why I say don't do CompTIA anything. One is the knowledge you gain for the most part won't be deep enough for any job. And two, when I measure a certification, I look at it and say, is it going to get me an interview or a hiring manager to want to talk to me? And if so, I might get it. And I'll give you examples of ones that do. Or I look at it and say, will it give me the skills? And if the answer is no, will it give me an interview? And if the answer is yes, I would do it. And if the answer is no, CompTIA certifications will not get you an interview. So also, all these things that are out there are related to engineering, and I need you to learn architecture, which is learning the exact opposite field. So you don't need to take anything to start our course. Let me give you some examples of people that had no tech background. Lenny Burnett was our video editor, but he got hired by Citrix as a solutions architect before we found him. Jordan Kitko was a college student before AWS hired him. We were his training camp. Daniel Bosu was 20 years old. He dropped out of high school, did not even have a GED, but he was smart as can be. The kind of kid I'd love to have as a son because he was just so smart. Anyway, this kid came to our program. He fought like you can't imagine. And 6 months later, he got hired by JP Morgan Chase, and it was his first job. His last job was at Nordstrom. Jermaine was selling landscaping gear, but we got him hired as an enterprise architect when he was done. Coyote was a college student hired by AWS. Delroy Batt was working on ambulances as an emergency technician, a medical technician, before we got him hired at CDW. Al Legister was a sales rep before he got hired as Deloitte as a senior solutions architect. Balwinder Kerr was a stay-at-home mom. So if you get the right training, you can do. And here's why I don't really believe in fundamentals courses. You know what the first job a physician takes is? Doctor. The first job a lawyer takes is law. First job the airplane pilot takes in his paid job is an airplane pilot. It's not a flight attendant. It's not an auto mechanic. So I'd say find your career, take all your time, all your effort, and laser-like focus on exactly what's going to get you to your outcome as fast as possible. If you want to be a cloud architect or an AI architect or an enterprise architect, we could help you get there, and I'd love to do so. If you want to be an engineer, we don't teach engineering now, and I don't really recommend engineering careers except for people that want to be behind the desk. But I love engineers, and I think they're some of the most important people in the world. I just typically recommend engineers where there's more upward mobility, there's greater pay, and it's an easier job for the pay. But that's just me because I'm more of a career coach. Terrence, how long is our internship in the program, and do you provide a reference? Well, the answer is yes. It's not your experience. So, Terrence, let me tell you this. If I wanted a receptionist, I want 5 years experience. If I want a nursing assistant, I want 5 years experience. If I want a waiter or waitress in my restaurant, I want 5 years experience. And why is that? Because hopefully the person learned something in the last few years. But what am I really chasing, Terrence? I'm chasing competency or the ability to do the job and do it well. Who's more competent to you, Terrence? Person number one over here, and then I'll answer your question, has a PhD in cybersecurity, a CISSP, a CCSP, and a CISM, the three biggest certifications in the PhD. 25 years experience. This person, guess what? They're a 14-year-old hacker with no certifications, and they just hacked into the system designed by the PhD with 25 years experience and a boatload of certifications. We hire the 14-year-old because that person is more confident. So, Terrence, you stay in our program until you're hired. I am not a boot camp. My team is not a boot camp. We love when people get hired. I will tell you that on average, our training program, our internship is about 8 to 12 months, but maybe you're a little slower getting through, and we let you stay. We've got 12 months in the live training, unlimited in the non-live, and we keep updating that course weekly, no matter whether you're in it or not, whether you're in the live or not. So you get unlimited access to our community, our Slack platforms, and all the people that work together. So there's I give recommendations all the time. And what happens is people put down Go Cloud Careers internship on their resume, and they list the things they do, which is actual real work experience doing real architecture things, not engineering things. And then they come and check references. And as long as that person came to class and was good and followed all the rules, we can give the references. Now, we only do that in the live program. We don't do it in the non-live program. And here's the reason. In the live program, Terrence, I'm going to see you in class. I'm going to meet you. I'm going to know you. And when that hiring manager asked me, can you tell me about Terrence? I can say, I know Terrence. I've worked with him for about a year. Assuming this is the case, he's a very sharp person, attends class, never misses class, is always in there designing systems. Now I got something good to say about you. If I didn't know you because I never met you, it'd be a little harder for me to do that. And that's why I say for the live and not the live. But I give references all the time. All the time. Hi, Mike. Suppose you manage to secure a position as an AWS architect solely through your soft skills. Happens all the time in architecture fundamentals. Any suggestions on how to tackle the gap in knowledge? You know, I got to tell you this. The more you learn, the more you're going to realize you don't know. So, Michael, here's what I remember. I remember when I started tech, I took a CCNA exam, and I was like, I knew networking now. I was all excited, right? And then a week later, I went to a CCNP boot camp, and I went, well, there's a lot more to this networking thing that I didn't think I knew. And then as soon as I finished that, I started in the CCIE curriculum. And as soon as I passed the CCIE exam, I went to work and I was put on a project, and nothing that I had to work on was even available covered in the CCIE exam. And I went, oh my God, what am I going to do? So what did I do? What I actually did with this is, Michael, and I know you, so assuming you get hired, or have got hired, and I know you've got the capabilities. Now the key is when you have a problem, you have to break the problem into many little problems. Now, there's a Navy SEAL that I like, and he always talks about if you have to eat an elephant, do it one bite at a time. So break it down. Break it down into the business requirements. Break it down into the business architecture. Go look at that high-level architecture and then break that high-level architecture down to its elements. What kind of network elements are here? What kind of storage elements are here? What kind of compute elements are here? And as you break it down, Michael, you're going to see, more and more of it. But the real key, Michael, is that as an architect, you should never be doing it by yourself. And that's the key. This follows my favorite proverb in the world. It's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So here's the way I do every architecture. Remember, I always say how much I love cloud engineers, because they are the heroes behind the scenes on these things. So if I've got an architecture, and let's say I've got AWS and Azure fundamentals and cloud fundamentals too, not meaning you know what virtual machines are, containers, storage area networks, you understand all this stuff at the component level. Now I'm going to build my architecture team. So, okay, now I'm running this team. There's an application architect over there. He or she knows more about applications than I ever will. There's that DevOps engineer. Let me bring this person along the way and get some of their feedback and permission and help and guidance. That IAM architect, they're pretty good with all these authentication systems. Let me talk to that person. Now I need to figure out what kind of golden build operating systems, what are demilitarized zones going to look like? Let me go talk to the security people. So, Michael, it's more about your soft skills and more about your leadership skills. The best architect, I remember I met an architect. He was one of the best. He was a chief technology officer. So think enterprise architect. And I met him. I was working on Wall Street, and I was the head network architect. And I remember meeting with this person. And he said, Mike, I don't have a tech background. And he said, so I need more help from you. And I said, okay, you're the chief technology officer, not me. He said, I've spent my life as an executive. And he says, I know how to make money. He said, I know how to find efficiency, and I know how to fix stuff. So he said, Mike, what kind of technology exists, and what can you do to make stuff better? He said, here's my problem, here's my problem, here's my problem, here's my problem, here's my problem. He said, go build a team of whatever the heck you need. And he said, here's the things that I look for. better, faster, and cheaper. If it can do 2 out of 3, we probably need to do 7. And it can do 3 out of things, we definitely need it. So figure it out. And by the way, Mike, show me how every decision you make is going to impact our business. I learned more about architecture from that guy. And then, when I started building those teams, I started doing the same thing. I started saying, why is this one architect trying to do it with 2 or 3 of their buddies when I can use the entire team? And what happened is the people that tried to do it with 2 or 3 of their buddies had an architecture failure where the tech either worked or it didn't work, or it didn't provide any business value. And I was focused so much on those business needs and those business outcomes that we were being successful on those. And I used that team behind me to help me with the tech. And that's when my customers were like, send more of Mike, send more of Mike. Mike, what do you want? And that's when my career really rose. So in the event you got hired on general good fundamentals and soft skills, yeah, that's fine. You're going to be just fine. Now, what I would do is try to learn as much as I possibly can. So you're on a networking project, go learn networking or learn about the kind of networking you're on. You're on a new virtualization product, learn about the platform. So you constantly learn. I think in the first year that I actually had, so assume I had passed the CCIE right around the time I started my first tech job, within a couple months. After that, I went home and I read for 3 to 5 hours a day, every single day for the first year. And at the end of that first year, I finally felt confident in my skills. Now, I read a bit. Well, I read every day for the next 10 years, but because that made me feel better. And I was always trying to make myself better. So that way, anytime there was an opportunity for advancement, I could take it. Anytime I could see a cut in the company, like they were going to do a layoff, I was busy showing them why I had the next skills for the future so I wasn't affected, those kind of things. So I think you're going to be in good shape. Michael, I know you, and I think you're going to be in really good shape. I assume there are professionals will be on your team with cloud-specific knowledge. Absolutely. Would a company even hire like this? Absolutely. So generally speaking, they're going to put our architects through fairly technical interviews. Now, most of my students, after they get hired, they're like, Mike, you taught us all this tech. Why? It was more of a conversation, more of a presentation. Why was it? I'm like, well, some people get techie on the interview, and I'd rather make you better. But these are really business roles, and they pay like business roles do. And they're really about business optimization. And if you're, I think it was David Lithicum that said it to me, and he's, again, an architect deeply respected in the industry. And if he says to me, if I interviewed a cloud architect and they could tell me the API limitations of an API in Azure, I know they're the wrong person. And what he meant by that was, if they're so busy focused on that tech minutia, they're not going to be focused on the clients getting to their business goals, and the architectures will fail. So yes, in any new job, you're going to feel terrified, but I think you know more than you think you do, Michael. And I can say that in your case. Thank you, Wes. I'm so happy to help. Oops. Big brother in my life. Is my program suitable for new to the field? Absolutely. We start everybody from ground zero. I mean, we build a career plan for you. We literally start with a tech fundamental section that's got hundreds of videos and articles in it. And I start everybody at ground zero. And here's the reason. Let's say I have a software developer. You know what they know? How to develop software. Do you know what they won't know that's critical to the job? Networking, compute, storage, data for the most part, security, AI, or anything else. They're going to know software development. So for the most part, since there's no software development in architecture, we don't code. We're not engineers. We're architects. Then poof, I got to start that person from scratch. Now I've got a network architect that comes in, or a network engineer that comes in. Okay, now I've got something that's a little more relevant. Now they probably know networking. Maybe they know network design. Maybe if they were like a design engineer. Now I just need to teach them the data center, security, big data, application architecture. So again, they may have one of the 10 elements that they need, but they're still going to be missing the 9 other elements, because in any of these architectural roles, they're so big that if you honestly had to master everything that goes into what we do, and you gave it 50 years of networking and 50 years of wireless networking and 50 years of voice networking and 50 years of video networking and 50 years of security and 50 years of application architecture and 50 years of generative AI architecture and 50 years of regular AI architecture and 50 years of agentic AI architecture and 50 years in big data and 50 years as a data scientist, you get the point. We would need tens of thousands of years to live. And quite frankly, unless somebody is a vampire and they live forever, or like Highlander in the movies where they could live forever, it's just not going to happen. So we start everybody at ground zero. And that way, I can assure when people leave our program, they are prepared to work. And occasionally you'll see companies like Amazon sent a director, well, a director from Amazon came to our class one day. There's another cloud company that sent one of their VPs from HR about why they like to hire our people, because of our focus on all those other things and the completeness of what we do. But mostly our focus on business goals. And our program is about 1,000 hours, so we have plenty of time to get you through it. If you got questions, please feel free to ask them. Thanks for that. Another question. If anyone that followed your cloud architect program have failed to find a good job, what would you say they did wrong? So in the beginning of our program, here's what happened. What I used to do is we had all the modules in the program and then the tech labs outside the program. And then everybody would do the tech labs and skip the entire architect program. And what would they learn? Not architecture. So there were the people that didn't take the class. So the people that I found that have struggled have done one of the following. They haven't followed our program. So what they would do is they would do some of the questions. And for example, we've got hundreds of classes to watch, and they wouldn't watch any of the classes, or they wouldn't come to class. Or as soon as we would do what architecture was, they would stop and get an irrelevant certification in someone else's career. But anybody that takes our program that doesn't quit on the program will be hired, or should be hired, because we don't quit on them. So that's the real piece, is the people that just said, I give up. And that's the real the sadness is some people, when they go to college, they just quit and they don't finish. Some people, when they sign up and they go to the tryouts, they don't finish. So for the most part, that's the people that don't go through, or the ones that just don't finish. And it can happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes people get sick. I get it. Sometimes people just find a new passion in life. But anybody that's taken our program, if they wanted to come back to a class or did come back to a class, we would just welcome them. Like, because somebody, all I care about is somebody gets hired by the end of our program. And if people do the work and they come to class and they follow directions and don't quit. And, why do I say don't quit? Because, the markets, economies change. You go on a hiring spree and everybody gets hired. And then there's a layoff spree and then almost nobody gets hired for a couple of months. And then, boom, they go on a hiring spree again 6 months later. So, and I had to do this in my career. But that's really the issue. But for the most part, people that come to class and do the work and follow everything as designed do very well. What does a typical day look like for me as a cloud architect? So I'll tell you what they're typically like. And it's funny because David Lithicum and I just recorded a video like this, Cloud Doctor. I'm sure we'll get it out in the next few weeks. So I will say, for the most part, a day would be the following. First thing I would typically do is I would open up an email in the morning and check my email messages. In some cases, that would be Slack messages as well. And I'm also going to check the phone calls that I received. And I'm going to respond to any emails as quick that matter immediately. Anything that requires analysis, I'll let people know that got it. I'll be working on it. And when I'm going to deliver that kind of thing, make sure any calls are called back. Because for me, the responsiveness of the person on the other end of the line, knowing that they're going to be there when you need them, really needs a lot. So there's that. For me, in most days, I would have a customer meeting. And that customer meeting ends up taking a couple of hours. So here's why I mean it takes a couple of hours. So in many cases, you have to go to the client site. And if you have to go to the client site, what we're really talking about is drive time or airplane time. And when you go to the client site, there's typically a lunch or dinner or drinks involved. So that's going to take in a couple hours if and when you do that. But there's typically something that looks like that, something that's customer facing, because I always did a lot of sales calls. I will also tell you that during the day, there's going to be meetings. And many of these meetings and many of these sales calls now we can actually do on Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams or something like that. But lots of meetings. And the reason you're going to be in meetings is if you're in the process of figuring things out with your clients, you're going to have to speak to a lot of stakeholders and try to get information. Otherwise, if your client's issuing an RFP, then you're going to get the RFP and then you're going to have more meetings because you're going to distribute the request for proposal across your team. So again, you're going to have these meetings and then you're going to have meetings where you're going to be facilitating, various people and technology people to put things together. And that's going to be pretty much an everyday basis. You're also going to be spending, maybe 1 to 2 hours each day doing research and trying to figure out what could be done and is it possible. You're going to spend a lot of time on the phone calling people. And here's the thing, architecture is a big job. I'm going to need to bring in somebody on my team and I'm going to need them to work for me for 6 months to a year. And this might be a $300,000 a year employee. And I might need 15 of them for the next 6 months. So if I need 15 $300,000 a year employees at full time for 1 year, that's $4.5 million to the cost of the company. Cut it in half. So now I'm dealing with like $2.3 million of budgets of people that I need. So now I'm going to have to sell the management on why I need those people. I'm going to have to show the value of the opportunity and create some financial metrics to show why I need these people internally. I'm going to be building a business case to show the client why this $1 billion architecture is going to be worth it for them. So it's going to be that. Now, there'll be days where I present at conferences versus presenting to customers. There'll be days where you do an interview with the press. And if you've got an interview with the press, typically speaking, that means preparing before, during, and after, before the meeting, during the meeting, and then doing a post debrief after the fact. And more teams and more lunches. I also do a lot of lunches and entertainments with clients. I spend a lot of time taking people for dinner and drinks. And I do it for the following reason. You're going to find more information when you're having 2 scotches with somebody than you probably would being in that meeting all day inside the building when someone's a little more relaxed. And if I'm going to work with an architecture team for the next 6 months, and we just happen to all be in Miami that day, because the client's in Miami, well, why shouldn't I take them to dinner and take them to drinks and deepen my relationship with all these folks and find out any problems or challenges they have in their careers, especially while they're working on my projects. And if I'm a good leader, I'm going to remove obstacles from their way. And I also might be involved in creating a training and mentoring plan. So if I work with a lot of cloud engineers and they want to be managers, I'm going to give them some leadership training and leadership skills. They're helping me with my tech. If the cloud engineer says, I want to move up into an architect role, well, maybe I can tutor them along the way. Maybe they can do a great job and I speak with management to get them promoted. But it's all day. It's conversation. Entertain client, give a presentation, write a document, sit at a desk, go to a meeting, facilitate a meeting, lead a meeting. So I got to tell you, I can't believe people pay us to do this. And it sounds absolutely ridiculous, Cloud Doctor, until you have one of these jobs. But what happens is, when we start our careers, we're doing all the work. We're doing all this hard work. As we rise in our careers, we're trying to figure out strategy and strategic directions and how to best utilize the people and everything we have, all of our assets for success. And making the right decisions, because you make the wrong decision, people suffer. So it changes completely. Stress doesn't go down, because now you're an executive and you make the wrong decision and 80,000 people lose their lives or lose their jobs. So you got to be focused. The stress goes up. That's okay. Cloud Doctor, how do you collaborate with development, operation, and security teams? And how important is cross-functional communication in the architect role? There is no architect role without cross-functional communication. So how do I collaborate it? Well, a couple things. One is it's all about your leadership skills. So I've invested, my company's invested. I took about $300,000 of education to teach me what I actually do and how I do it. So there is that. So start with that. Then it's about, having the emotional intelligence to talk to people, having the leadership skills to talk to people, knowing how to exercise influence, as Robert Cialdini would say, and learning all those principles. Then it's about learning what the team that you need wants, what are their goals and need, and helping find a way to get them there. So, for example, now I need a cross-functional team. I've got a new architecture, and there's a bunch of applications that need to be developed. It needs high security. And at the same time, we need to make sure that what we design can actually be managed by the operations people after the fact. Well, I'm going to bring some operations rep as part of my architecture. I'm going to bring in some application architects and software developers. I'm going to bring in these security teams. Because, Cloud Doctor, if I'm an architect, do I know how long it takes for somebody to configure 1,000 checkpoint firewalls? Probably not. Probably never configured a firewall in my entire life if I'm an architect. But those security engineers that do it do know. And I might need their guidance. Now, as an architect, I'm not going to know how long it's going to take to code an application. So I want that application architect and those software engineers to get it. So there is no architecture without an entire team. Now, the only possible way you could do the architecture without the team is to basically try to turn an architect into an engineer. And there are companies that do it. Now, not big companies, not companies that value technology, but there are some people that try to say, here, design it and build it. And that's an engineering job, not an architect job. It pays a half of an architect job. And you won't see it at a company that matters, like an AWS and Azure, or Cisco, or Google, and IBM, and Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Global Bank, like a JP Morgan Chase Bank. You're not going to see it in those kind of environments because technology matters to these companies. So if you learned all this tech, which would take you a couple hundred years to truly master the tech, or we won't live that long. But then if you're focused on the tech, who's focused on the business, Cloud Doctor? Nobody. And that's your job as the architect. So you can't do this job without a team. And if you try to do it without the team, you become part of that 70 to 80% of cloud architectures that actually provide zero business value. So how bad is it to provide an architecture in 4 out of 5 times that doesn't work? Well, imagine spending $1 billion. And, I work with companies that have a $2 billion a year IT spend. So imagine spending $1 billion and getting nothing. Now, what could you do with that business, that $1 billion in the business? Could you fund a brand new division? Could you configure a marketing campaign? Could you spend the $1 billion on your employees because they hadn't gotten a raise in the last 3 years because the business was struggling? Funding IT and things that didn't work? Yeah, you could do any one of those things. Because there's an opportunity cost. You can only invest in one place. So that's why a bad architecture is a bad architecture. It costs people jobs. Because if they started a new vision, a new business division, guess what? New jobs created. So that's the thing. Hope that makes sense, Cloud Doctor. Drifting Tangerine. Mike, would you say is the main cause of cloud repatriation? And what's the best way forward? I would joke and say the main cause of cloud repatriation is the AWS Cloud Practitioner exam that told people cloud computing was cheaper, which it isn't. And they made up all the reasons why it's cheaper, where they talked about economies of scale and whatever. What they didn't say is, yes, a big company does get an economy of scale when they buy it, meaning they buy in such large quantities, they get a discount. What they didn't say is that when you get to hyperscale at the level we are of the cloud providers, it might cost 2 to 3 times more to run the same systems because they need so many checks and balances. And what they didn't say is that really cloud computing is just building a data center and renting you out virtualized data center space as opposed to the physical data center you had. And it made it that, people didn't understand that And then they even tried to say we're extra green because you don't need to buy 10,000 servers. But the thing is, they were buying those same 10,000 servers. So that kind of, buzzwords, the cloud's cool, the cloud's cheaper, the cloud's better, the cloud's faster. No, they were all wrong. The cloud is more agile. And the agility provided by the public cloud is absolutely incredible. And the cloud is one of the best tools we have. But architecture is like medicine. The frameworks, these frameworks and these certifications that say cloud first, cloud first, cloud first. Drifting Tangerine, here's what they really are. Here's what cloud first means. Imagine going to a doctor and bringing 100 friends with you. And as soon as you walk into the parking lot, they said, you are all going to get nose surgery. Why am I going to get nose surgery? Because nose surgery is what we feel you need. Now, obviously, that's ridiculous, right? Maybe one person needs surgery. Maybe one person needs a medication. Maybe one person doesn't need to go to the doctor at all. But cloud first, and the cloud first was kind of the thinking and promotion that came out of that cloud practitioner and some of these well-architected frameworks is, you got to be in the cloud. We're better, we're faster, we're cheaper. And sometimes that's the case, and sometimes that's not. So, Drifting Tangerine, sometimes the absolute best performing technology for a high transaction workloads is a mainframe. And guess what? Mainframe spending is going up. Sometimes the best thing we can use is a microservice-based application because we've got 10,000 developers and common reuse of application patterns. Sometimes microservice is the worst thing we can do, and we'd be better off with a monolith. Sometimes a serverless environment is cheaper. Sometimes the serverless environment costs us too much. So how bad is the problem? Well, with my students in my enterprise architect program, we actually procured, for the fun of it, a server from, from Dell. And fully spec'd out with about 6 terabytes of RAM and the coolest, baddest AMD EPYC CPUs we could find, and 100 terabytes of storage. It was about $300,000. Now, if you finance that server over 4 years, it was about $9,000 a month for a company if they just went and got financing for it, with about a 7% weighted average cost of capital. Now, that same servers was about $80,000 a month in the cloud, 10 times more expensive. So those kind of use cases, just don't go to the cloud with them. And when this concept of lift and shift and just take everything to the cloud came about, people went there because they thought they were getting something cheaper. And in the end, they paid much, much, much more. So about 92% of people surveyed say they're taking some workloads back to the cloud. Now, Drifting Tangerine, if you followed Go Cloud Careers and Go Cloud Architects 4 years ago, we always taught people hybrid multi-cloud, because we knew that the stuff that was going to go in the cloud is going to go out of the cloud. And we also knew that cloud repatriation is the greatest opportunity for cloud architects. And here's why. A real cloud architect designs multi-cloud solutions, and 90% of businesses use multi-cloud. So if you're taking it from the AWS cloud and you're sticking in the Azure cloud, it's a cloud architect's job to plan that. If you're taking it from the AWS cloud and putting in your data center into your Nutanix cloud, it still takes a cloud architect. So now we start seeing things that make more sense. Put the workloads that run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, your big AI workloads or big compute workloads, stick them in the data center. Train your AI model in the cloud. Stick this website in the cloud because we want auto scaling here, and auto scaling and right sizing we can do in the cloud for this website. But stick this high performance, low latency application in the data center. So when people were polled, why are they repatriating? Some of the reasons included security, because they've had about 5 times the security events since moving to the cloud. Much of that was user error. The other side of it was cost. David Lithicum's number, and it's pretty accurate, at least from my is that cloud computing total cost of ownership is about 2.5 times more than it was in the data center. And a lot of it is we can improve the performance by putting some of these low latency workloads in the data center. So it's great opportunities for cloud architects, and it's just poor architecture. When an architecture framework starts out as go cloud first, And architecture frameworks out there, and some of these well-architected frameworks from various providers, they say, oh, use managed services, use serverless. Well, drifting tangerine. Everybody needs surgery. That's exactly what that's saying. So the point is, the architect's that trusted advisor. We need to know what they need and get them to their goals, whatever that is, and only know once how they want to work and why they want to work, and we even think about what's the right technology. That's why we have so much cloud repatriation. Freedom Lands. Hi, Mike. How do you decide what company you want to work for? Well, you mean as your first job or long term? So, in my first job, especially if I'm going to go from working in a shoe store to being an architect, I'm probably going to take anyone that offers me the job, assuming it's the real architect job. Now, 5-10 years into it, where I'm ready to, and because I've worked hard and studied, I'm at that principal architect or that distinguished architect sort of range. Now I start looking at where I'm going to be happy and where I can retire at. So, for example, I'm going to look for a company that's a cultural fit for me. What do I mean by this, Freedom Labs? There are basically two kinds of companies. Company one, where everybody's paid the same, everybody gets the same bonus, and everybody gets an average on the review. And no matter what you do, the only way you get promoted is every 10 years somebody gets a promotion. Company B is the harder you work, the more you get paid. The more you do, the faster you get promoted. I die in an environment where everybody's the same. I thrive in an environment where I can outwork my competition. And that's where I want to go. So first, there's that cultural fit. Then I personally look at, what does that company stand for? And they're making a world a better place. When I was at Cisco, I felt very strongly that Cisco was improving the way we live, work, and play. So I stayed there for a very long time. One of the things about Cisco is they allowed anybody to work there. And I mean any perspective, any view of the world, any background. And I like that. Because maybe I don't think like somebody else and I want to have my own freedom of thought. So I like that. That made me feel really good. Other companies, everybody has to look, walk, and talk the same way. I don't like that. So I don't find that kind of company. And I also, when I interview, I look around at the people that are there. I see how they stay. Because, there's some companies that, every 2 years, somebody's gone. Everybody that goes there is gone. I don't work there unless I'm desperate. I look for the places where, wow, this person's been here for 10 years, and this person's been here for 15 years, and this person's been here for 20 years. Because I want a place where I can grow and I can thrive, and I'm not changing jobs every 5 minutes. I like to grow roots. Where's my house going to be? I don't want to live in an apartment and rent it. There's nothing wrong with that, but me, I like to build roots. I like to know people. I like to have friends where I'm at that I truly have deep relationships with. And that's something that I'm looking for. So those are the factors that go into me. But I also look at the financial security of the company. Are they going to win? Or are they going to have to cut very soon because they've made bad business decisions? And again, that's the kind of thing that I would look at. So those are the kind of factors that I weigh when I determine where I'm actually going to be. Hope that helps. So if you've got any more questions, ask us. I'm more than happy to stick around a little longer if you do. If not, I have kind of a chaos day, so I'll happily get back to work if there's no more questions. But if you've got questions, please ask them. I really love answering them. What correlation with cloud repatriation have you seen with the increase of mergers and acquisitions and interoperability challenges to main hybrid multi-cloud architecture and the vision of stakeholders? So, Ms. Lam and Jaman, I know you, and wow, it is good to see you. Very good to see you. So, I think the biggest issue that I'm seeing with cloud repatriation is people put the systems and workloads there for the wrong reasons. That's the real issue. The interoperability, again, is bad architecture. And here's what I mean by this. If I have a global conglomerate, there is a real chance that I'm going to buy a new company. If I decide out of nowhere that I'm going to go to AWS and I use Amazon Aurora, I locked myself into a bad architectural decision because now when this company buys another company, how am I integrating Aurora and Oracle and the other stuff? And now I got to write middleware. I don't want to deal with that. That's creating an architectural nightmare. So sticking to more industrial things and sticking to the bigger ones that we would be using anyway. Now, Miss Lam and Jamin, in a merger and acquisition, there's a lot of things that have to go. A lot of it is looking at the organization's culture, the processes that actually occur, what people will be moved from the merged company because they have too many staff. Can those people redesigned? So all that stuff's going to be there. And all in all, the cloud makes it easier. Because if you're on the cloud and they're on the cloud, now we've got private link and other types of equivalent services which make us have a wide area network that's there. So less of that and more of this cloud repatriation is the cloud is just way too expensive for most workloads. And at the same time, cloud computing is incredibly agile. So I want you to think about this. So let's say you wanted a new AI solution. And the new AI solution needed 100 NVIDIA H100s. Now, in reality, it's going to be cheaper for you to buy 12 servers with an NVIDIA H100s than it would be for you to rent them in the cloud by about 80 to 90%. But Miss Lam and Jamin, what if you needed 1 million hours of GPU training time? Well, I mean, you could spend a year in your data center, or you could do that in a week or two on the public cloud and be done with it. And now have your new competitive tool done and ready to go faster than your competition. That's the agility we're talking about. By comparison, if we have a company that's going to do a lot of mergers and acquisitions, maybe we stick them in the cloud. And then it makes it very easy to bring in new businesses, either via VPNs or direct connections to the cloud, or they're already on the cloud. So I'm not seeing it more related to mergers and acquisitions. Now, what you are saying is businesses making a reconsideration. This is an interesting one. So I forget where I was headed. That's the challenge of doing things live, is occasionally you forget what you're actually we're going to say. Chris, let's move on to the next one. I totally lost my train of thought there. How you're 35 and you're about to quit your job as a bookkeeper and join the reserves. Thank you for your service. After your basic training, you want to go into cloud security engineering. How or where do you start in 3 months when you're back from training? So the question I have for you is, what kind of security engineering? Do you want to be someone that protects the systems? Or do you want to be an ethical hacker that attacks the systems and then reports their findings? Because it's a completely different set of skill for the defender versus the attacker. In much the same way that a sniper skills in a military that doesn't take a shot inside of 500 yards for the most part in the battlefield is typically different than someone that's got a pistol in close quarters. So it's a very different set of skills. So I really want to know what you're doing. But here's what I would tell you. First thing is that you need to learn security. And I would look for a good training program. There are not many that are good there. Chris or Tyrone, if you have the link to the one that I found that I can realistically suggest, put it in the link. And if not, we're gonna have we've been training a lot of cloud security architects, but we don't train engineers. This other one was more of an engineering course that's actually out there. But what I would do is I would make sure I learned security for real. I would make sure the people that taught me are the ones that are actually going to, let me see, bear with me for 1 second. using. So I would make sure that I figured it out. Okay, so you want to be a defender. Good. So now what do you actually have to do? So first thing we need to do is get you some basic understanding of computers, because you're going to be protecting these things. So I'd probably get hands-on. I'd build some virtual machines. I'd build some containers. I'd build some Linux machines. I'd probably set up a Kali Linux system, and I'd use that just to do some vulnerability assessment penetration testing, just to give you a little hands-on. I'd say buy a server with, say, 24 cores, install a hypervisor on it, and you can set up your own little security lab in there. You can use things like EVE-NG, and with that, you can run any kind of software you want from any firewall, or there's this. Now, for engineering, here's the course, my team. It's the SANS course. And Chris, or from my team, can you drop that in the chat box? I can tell you that in this 1 week course, even though it's not enough, you're actually going to learn something. And, this is a good career, and, the training is not going to come free. That's not our training, but I can recommend it. It's very good on the security engineering side. Now, I would also recommend getting some certifications. Now, these are the certifications I'm going to recommend. And they're going to sound crazy, and I'll tell you why they sound crazy, and I'm going to tell you why they work. I would like you to get the CISSP, the CCSP, and I think those two will kind of work for you. Here's why I say the CISSP. To me, that is the best intro to security that's out there. It covers a little bit of everything you might need to know, everything from application security to network security to the legal side of the security. That level of knowledge is bare minimum for me to hire someone. Bare minimum. So there's that. So after that, then I would start using that server, and I would start learning how to set stuff up. I'd configure some firewalls in that EVE-NG server. I'd set up some virtual machines. I'd learn how to harden those virtual machines and lock them down. I'd build an Active Directory server on that server and learn how to work with identity and access management systems, and tend to do that. I would try to build the VPN concentrator, try to create some remote access VPNs. I'd take 2 routers on that EVE-NG server and try to set up IPsec tunnels. And not only when I set up the IPsec tunnels, look at them with the protocol analyzer and try to see how these tunnels are set up. I'd build some basic routers and switches on the systems and play with some networking things. If you did that, you're going to have really good security knowledge. That course that we sent you, that's going to give you some strong fundamentals. The CCSP certification, which I talked about, we're going to run that completely free on our YouTube channel starting next month. And if you're away at boot camp, that's okay. When you come back, it'll still be here. And that's going to give you good. I would say stay away from the CompTIA Security Plus. It's not enough to get you an interview, and it's not as strong as the CISSP. But if you do that, you should be in good standing. In fact, if you want to go do that, find a good refurbished server with, say, 24 cores and at least 128 gigs of RAM. You want to set up a hypervisor on that and an EVE-NG server on that, and you can use that for your router. You can set up your own little hacking environment, various virtual machines, Windows, Linux. You can practice locking those systems down. You're going to have really, really good skills. And with skills like that, you should have no problem being hired as a security engineer, defensive security engineer. Thank you, Eva. Businesses are making reconsider on the topic of us watching market trends. So, yeah, the real key is it's not somebody's leaving the cloud, we should leave the cloud too. It was more about if the architecture was correct, they'd stick with it. If the architecture is incorrect, the business will change. No different than if a patient went to the doctor, and I know you've got a pharmacy background, so I'm mentioning this, and I prescribed an antibiotic to my patient for a sinus infection. 5 days later, they called me back and said it's getting worse. And I brought them back in my office and I changed the antibiotic. It's that same thing, Miss Lam and Jamin. That's really what it's at. It's more about, are we using the right tool for the right job? And as the technology gives us more and more opportunities, and businesses are saying this AI thing, this has the potential to change everything. We're struggling with worker productivity right now. People aren't getting the job done, but AI can do it. Maybe AI is the secret sauce. Maybe AI can help here. So businesses are now where businesses are saying, okay, now we want to go make these investments, but where's the money come from? Oh, let's pull it out of the cloud, stick it back at the data center. That's really what's going on. Can AI architecture be an avenue into cybersecurity work at Go Cloud Architects? I don't know what you mean by that. Are you asking that if you did AI architecture, would that help us find you a security job with us? I'm not really sure what you mean. Generally speaking, from my perspective, I like to hire people. And I'm not just talking to me in the way I like to hire people. I'm talking about how managers like the people. So let's say I wanted to hire an airplane pilot. Who am I going to hire? Someone that knows how to fly a plane. Who am I not going to hire? An airplane mechanic that fixes the engines, even though I have deep respect for them. The flight attendant that keeps people safe on the flight. If I need an airplane pilot, I'm going to hire an airplane pilot. Now, when I look at an architect, if an architect's spending all their time in AI, why would I see they would work in cybersecurity? I wouldn't. Now, if I had an architect that had expertise in AI, and I'm Palo Alto Networks, or I'm Fortinet, or I'm Checkpoint, or I'm Cisco, and I make firewalls, ooh, bring me your AI expertise, because I want your AI expertise in my security. But in my world, I'm going to send somebody in front of a customer. That customer is going to have a $50 million a year security spending. I'm going to put someone that's an expert in security in front of the customers for their security needs. I'm going to put an expert in AI for my AI needs. I'm going to send a patient that needs a cardiologist to a cardiologist versus a gastroenterologist. So generally speaking, for me, that would take somebody further away into cybersecurity. If I want to learn cybersecurity, I'd learn cybersecurity. And I've trained so many cloud security architects in our Cloud Architect Career Development Program, and they have great jobs. I'm thinking of a TV host from Togo right now. But that's typically how I do my thing. So I hope that makes sense. And please feel free to ask more questions so I misunderstood you. You come from a software engineering background. For a cloud architect job, how deep should your knowledge be of networking? Deep enough. So here's what I mean. One thing that we don't do in as cloud architects is touch the technology. So as an architect, you won't code, even though it's a wonderful skill you have. You won't configure technology. You won't do DevOps. You won't do SysOps. You won't do anything where you actually touch the technology. So what are you really designing? Because we're not designing applications. We're designing systems that are in the network and data center. So what is the tech things that I need you to know about as an architect? The network and the data center. So that means understanding routing, IP addressing, subnetting, supernetting, that kind of thing, route aggregation, route summarization. It means a good, strong knowledge in BGP. Obviously, we teach all these things to our students in our architecture program. It also means knowledge of switching, things like VLANs, VLAN tagging, VLAN trunking and how they work, link aggregation group, spanning tree, rapid spanning tree, kind of that kind of thing. It's also going to mean selection of the right wide area networking technology to connect your systems and your clouds. So that means knowledge of how you would use a private line versus an IPsec tunnel versus a software-defined WAN versus a SASE WAN. So at minimum, there would be that. Now, same thing, you would need to understand compute, and then you would need to understand storage, and then you would need to understand security, And then you would need to understand AI. And then you would need to understand data. Now, as you're hearing all these ridiculous things that I'm adding to the list. And the reason I'm saying it's ridiculous, at some point it becomes impossible. You're not going to be able to get it all. So when it comes to it, you typically have people coming from two different backgrounds in cloud architecture, and this is why you need a team. You either have people like me who come from an infrastructure background, meaning the servers, the storage, the network. And our expertise, Yosel, is high availability and high security. So a guy like me has been working on $1 billion plus infrastructure systems to make sure that they can run all but 5 minutes a day. It's familiar that each and every one of those things and eliminating all the single points of failure, because that's the infrastructure people. The next side that we have are people from the application side. You know what the application people know? Applications. What do they know about infrastructure? Almost nothing. What do the infrastructure people know about applications? Almost nothing. So if you've got that application background, pull it up a little bit. So from being coding, now start thinking about how applications are architected. What are the architecture patterns of applications? What are the APIs? How does application one talk to people? How should the applications be designed? And maybe you can pull some of that out, or you learn that from here. And then maybe your focus could be application architecture, and you could still be cloud architecture, and you need to be 65% as good on the networking thing. The way somebody like me from the infrastructure side is 65% as good on the application side. Now, how would I build an architecture team? I'd call David Lithicum up and say, oh, you come from the application side, I come from the infrastructure side, let's work together. And that's how you're going to get the absolute best. But if you know those things that I told you, you should be good to go from the networking side. But please don't think it's just networking. Make sure you understand the storage, and make sure you realize that it's not engineering, and it's all about your business knowledge and business capabilities. In fact, I'm going to, there's a free ebook that my team just popped on the top of the screen. So that will give you every little thing you need to know. I pretty much list every skill that you should be good at there and things that you need to know. And on Thursday, maybe join me for the free webinar. I've seen you here before. I'd love to meet you online on Zoom, and maybe we can talk there. I'm happy to assess you as well, and I'm really glad you're here. Darskin, you're currently in the AI architecture program, but you have an affinity for cybersecurity. I understand. Basically, caught between the two loves. I guess you need to be more decisive. So let me tell you what would go best. So if I wanted to be the best AI architect I could be, Darskin, I would say stay in the AI architect program and add the enterprise architecture modules, where we cover more business, more executive skills, and more digital transformation. If you wanted to go into the AI, into the security side, I get it. You could totally go into the security side. You'll still benefit from the AI knowledge you have, but then it's going to change your focus and focus on security. But your highest value option for you is enterprise architecture married with either cloud architecture or AI architecture. That's going to be your best long-term, highest salary, best career option. But if you love security, well, you can always divert it. In my life, I started out by practicing internal medicine. I'm a nurse practitioner. I practiced anti-aging medicine as well, a little bit of physical medicine and rehab. Then I found myself as a network architect, enterprise architect, cloud architect, business architect, and I know what it feels like to follow your passions. I spent a fair amount of time doing security work myself. Always loved security. And for me, Darskin, I actually have to hold myself back because I love security so much, because it's the most fun for me. And the second I focus on security because I like it so much, I lose my focus on the big picture and the strategy, which for me is not where I need to be. Now, maybe in my retirement, I like it so much, and this is, maybe I would just focus on security because I really love security. But you got to focus on something, and it's focus that makes the Olympians. It's focus that wins the challenge. Because at the end of the day, and actually we can talk a little bit about career planning for cloud architects and cloud engineers. You have to have a plan. So I'm going to make it like I'm going to coach a CEO right now. And I'm going to talk about what it would take to coach a CEO. And then I'll talk about what else how that might be different for if I was going to coach an architect to be an architect. And how they would go through their architecture career from first architect to VP of architecture. So let's say I was coaching a CEO. Here's what I would need to know. I need to spend a lot of time with that CEO. I need to know exactly what their goal is, what position they want to be in at what time. I would then have to assess them and see their strengths, weaknesses, capabilities. I would then see where they're at today and where they want to go. The next thing that I would do is I would determine what set of skills they need, how and where they're going to get them, and I would also determine what jobs they need and where these jobs need to be and what they need to learn in each job and how long they need to stay in each job. I would also plan out a media strategy plan for them. When are they going to the media? Who are they talking to the media? Why are they talking to the media? And I would do that to build their brand. And I'd probably have some social media people come in and fix their social media and tune it up if I was coaching a CEO. Now, if I was coaching an architect, how to go from solutions architect to CIO or CTO, it'd be fairly similar, but I wouldn't have to do as many things. Now, I basically need to assess them the same way I would find their strengths, weaknesses. I need to find out where they want to go. I need to assess their current skills. Same thing. Look at their future, what skills are needed. Create that gap analysis. And that's with any architecture, where you start versus where you go. I would build a plan to train those skills. I really would. I would build a plan around it to get that person speaking at certain conferences more frequently. Where do they need to speak? What do their media channels need to look like? I may not have to get that person a publicist for the CIO, where we're focused on which magazines or which TV stations, but I wouldn't have to focus that. And I'd be focused on, okay, so you're a solution architect. Take this job for 2 years. Here's how we get you to a senior solutions architect. Poof. Next 2 years, here's how we get you to a principal solutions architect. Now, let's get you into this enterprise architecture role. Let's build your business acumen, and poof, you're there. That would be one architectural pathway for them. The other one is, okay, you're a solutions architect. Now let's get you executive coaching, enterprise architecture training, and get them out of that solutions architect role straight into that enterprise architect role. And in that enterprise role, maybe they take that role for a year or two or 3, and then they move into a bigger company as an enterprise architect, and then poof, they go straight to CIO. So there's a couple ways we would do it, and we would talk about what we would learn along the way. So definitely make the plan. Because here's what happens if you don't make the plan. And I can tell you, I was guilty of it in my youth. Because now all of a sudden, you're working on something, and there's this little cool thing that you want to learn about because it's fun. And you only have 10 hours a week of professional development time. And there's this cool little thing, and you spend 3 hours at this seminar that's focused on engineering, but you're focused on becoming a CIO. Now you've reduced your training time from 10 hours to 7 hours. And 7 hours now isn't enough. And if your 7 hours isn't enough because you needed 10 hours, now it took you 30% longer, which now means you're not going to be able to get to your next job in a certain time because you lacked a certain set of skills. So I love that you're there. I love it. I have the same problem myself. I really do. I have my team basically say, Mike, remember your plan. Because I do the same thing myself. And that's the challenge when we come from the tech side too. If we love the tech too much, we have to keep focused. It's a great question you asked. I'm not in the AI program as much because I'd love to meet you. Maybe I'll hope to see you in one of the Friday day classes, but I get both loves. I understand both loves. On Thursday, we're going to have a free webinar on how to get your first cloud architect job. We will talk about the role, what we do, 100% of the skills you need, what employers are looking for, how to skip HR and not get auto-rejected, all of it, and it's all free. It'll be on Zoom. We'll talk. You can ask me any kind of questions you want. I also want to tell you that we're going to do some free, serious cybersecurity training. And we're going to do it completely free. The CCSP, it's one of those top 3 best certifications for cybersecurity professionals for the most part. And unless you were a penetration tester, in which case that'd be a slightly different pathway. And that's why I always ask the questions when people say cybersecurity, but it's one of the biggest ones. Normally be $5,000 to $10,000 for a real boot camp. And even that SANS boot camp that I talked about for cybersecurity training, that's a good $8,000. And we're going to do this one. And we're going to cover content that's fairly similar, but different for free. But so come join us. Come sign up. It's free. Please check out the video. You got guides on how to win the interview. We've got guides on how to be an architect, an AI architect, cloud architect, interview questions for your careers. They're free. Go download them. Hope you had a good time and you can like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell to be notified of new things to assist you in your cloud computing career. Tomorrow, we're going to have a real good show for you, and hope you join us.